In this video, we're going to look at the derivatives of trig functions. Well, this is going to be a very basic uh, derivatives. So for example, let's start with the derivative of sine. The derivative of sine of x is cosine of x. And the derivative of cosine of x is negative sine of x. And, and then the derivative of the tangent is the secant squared. And the derivative of the cotangent is the negative cosecant squared. So if you remember this one, derivative of the tangent is secant squared, then just remember derivative of the cotangent is cosecant squared with a negative in front. Next, let's look at the derivative of the secant. The derivative of the secant is the secant times the tangent. And the derivative of the cosecant is the cosecant times the cotangent with a negative in front. Like that. So once again, these two as well are pretty easy to remember. If you remember this one, derivative of the secant is secant times tangent. Then this is kind of related to derivative of the cosecant is cosecant times cotangent with a negative in front. So if you kind of see a little bit of the pattern, especially of these two, your memorization will be a lot easier. Next, let's go through this worksheet. Find the derivative of each of the following. And so this first one, the derivative, this one, of course, the derivative of x is just 1, and the derivative of the sine is cosine. So this will be minus 3 cosine x. Now down here, we have a product rule because we have two functions. The derivative of the first times the second plus the first times the derivative of the second. So derivative of the first is 1 times the second. So calling this the first function, second function, and then plus the first, which is x, times the derivative of sine, which is cos x. Let's move on. The derivative of this here, derivative of this would be cos x plus, and derivative of the tangent, remember, is the secant squared. This. Now let's go down to this one. Derivative of this, derivative of cosecant, is, remember, negative cosecant times cotangent. So the derivative of the cosecant is negative cosecant times cotangent. Then over here, the derivative of the cosine is negative the sine, like this. Now down in this one, we have a product rule. Let's call this the first function. This is the second. Derivative of the first times the second plus the first, which is x cubed, times the derivative of cos x. Derivative of the cos x is negative sine x. This. I'm going to do these next one on separate paper, give myself a little bit of room. We went the derivative of this. Now here we have a quotient rule. So it's going to be the derivative. Remember, the quotient rule says the derivative of the numerator times the denominator minus the numerator times the derivative of the denominator, all divided by the denominator squared. So let's do that. The derivative of the numerator is secant times tangent. And that's times the denominator minus the numerator times the derivative of the denominator. Now, the denominator derivative of that would be 0 plus the derivative of the secant. Remember, that's the secant times the tangent, like that, all over the denominator squared. Like that. Now we can simplify this a little bit. Let's multiply these through. This is going to be sec x tangent x, multiply this, plus secant squared x tangent x, multiply this in, minus secant squared x tangent x divided by 1 plus secant x squared, like this. And let's see, notice what we have here, secant squared times tangent minus secant squared times tangent, just going to leave us in the numerator with secant x tangent x 1 plus secant x squared, like that. Let's do another one. Once again, we have the quotient here. So we use the quotient rule. Derivative of the numerator, which is going to be 0 plus cos x times the denominator minus the numerator times the derivative of the denominator, and that's going to be 1, and then minus, remember, derivative of the cosine is minus the sine, like this, all divided by the denominator squared, like this. And let's see, let's multiply this out to see what we get. See if we can simplify anything. X cos x plus cos squared x. Now over here, when we FOIL this, you can notice that the middle term will end up disappearing because we're going to end up with 1 times 1, and then minus sine x over here. But over here, we have a positive sine x, so those are going to disappear. And then we multiply these two, we're going to get a minus sine squared. You can verify this when you get a chance, but this will all end up being minus sine squared x like this. This. And let's distribute this minus. This will end up being minus 1 plus sine squared x. And notice right here, we're going to have a cosine squared plus a sine squared. I won't take the time to rearrange it to show that, but cosine squared plus sine squared is 1. So when we add this and this, we're going to get 1. And then we're going to have like 1 minus 1. 1 plus cos x squared like that. This will be x cos x divided by x plus cos x squared like that. Finally, let's look at this last one. Y equals sine x divided by x squared. So once again, we have a quotient. The derivative of the numerator is going to be cos x times the denominator minus the numerator times the derivative of the denominator divided by the denominator squared. And let's see if we could simplify this at all. I think we can a little bit. Let me bring the x squared up front so we don't get confused. And same with the 2x, so bring that up front. Divided by x to the fourth. Now notice we could factor an x out of both these terms and then cancel one of these here. So we would end up with x cos x minus 2 sine x divided by x cubed. Now notice in all these ones we did in this video, the function, the trig function only had like an x here. It didn't have like a 2x or 5x, it didn't have x squared. We only had like x in all these. So in a future video, we'll look at cases in which this might be more than just x. It might have a constant here, or it could be an x cubed or a square root. We'll look at that next.